The arrivals board said, landed, at 4:11 in the afternoon. I know because I photographed it later. By then I had learned to photograph everything. I came off that jet bridge with a sea bag on my shoulder and 9 months and 11 days behind me. I counted them the way you count anything you plan to survive. 7 months at sea. Then a 90-day extension I never asked for. I had pictured this gate 1,000 times. In the picture, a small boy in dinosaur pajamas breaks away from his father's hand and runs at my knees. There was no small boy. There was my husband standing behind his mother. There was his mother standing in front of everyone, the way she stood in front of everything. There was his father, off at the edge, with his hands in his coat pockets and his eyes on his son. And there was a man I had never met, in a brown jacket, holding a white envelope with my name printed on it. "Audrey Sinclair," the man said. "You've been served." I took the envelope because my hands are trained to take what they are handed. My mother-in-law lifted her chin. "Emergency temporary custody," she announced, loud enough for half the terminal. "A judge already signed it. You abandoned that little boy." A stranger with a rolling suitcase slowed down to watch. Somewhere behind me, a family cheered for someone else's soldier. "Where is my son?" I said. "Safe," she said. "From this." My husband stared at the floor. He was 34 years old, and he stared at the floor like a boy waiting out a scolding. His father was not looking at me either. He was looking at his son, and there was something in his face I had never seen at any holiday table in 7 years. Then his father, who had not said one word all this time, reached into his coat. "There's something you should see," he said. But let me back up a little. 10 weeks earlier, I was standing in a ladder, well on an amphibious assault ship, reading a message that changed my winter. Our 7-month deployment had become a 10-month deployment, a 90-day extension, unit-wide, effective immediately. Nobody volunteers for a 90-day extension. It arrives like weather. My commanding officer read the order to us straight, and then he said, "Call your families tonight, say it plain." I tried. That is the part I want you to hold on to. I tried that night, and the night after, and the night after that. The calls were simple at the start of the float. Tuesdays and Saturdays, on the satellite windows, my husband's phone, or the yellow tablet we bought our son for his 4th birthday. A 4-year-old cannot hold a conversation. He can hold up a plastic triceratops, and that was enough. I can still play you the 2nd week of the float from memory. The tablet propped on the kitchen counter I had cleaned 100 times. My son's face too close to the camera, all forehead and one eye. "Mommy, guess what he ate?" "Who, buddy?" "Rex." The triceratops appeared, filling the screen. My son has never once cared that a triceratops is not a Rex. He ate a whole cow. A whole cow. Was it a brave cow? It was a bad guy cow. A pause. The deep kind, the kind 4-year-olds fall into without warning. "When is the ship done?" "October, baby, before Halloween." "Okay." He said it the way he accepted all treaties, instantly and completely. "You can be the mommy dinosaur when you come home." Somewhere off camera, my husband's voice said time to brush teeth, and the call ended the way they all did, with a small palm pressed flat against a lens 6,000 miles from my face. I read him bedtime stories into a recording app when the satellite windows did not line up. 41 of them by January. I mailed letters, real ones, because a letter can be held in a small hand. Around the 4th month, the calls started dying, ringing out, dropping. My husband texted that the Wi-Fi was bad, that the boy was finally sleeping through the night, that I should not call so late and wind him up. In the last month, I called 23 times and reached him twice. Both calls lasted under 4 minutes. Both ended with him saying some version of the same sentence. "Just land, we'll talk when you're home." There was one call in the 5th month I should have weighed more carefully. It connected for once. The picture found itself, and I was looking at our living room, and my son was at the little table with his crayons, close enough to hear. "Hey, Toby, look who it is." He looked up at the screen, and he looked at his father first. Checked his face, the way you check a sergeant before answering a question. Then he said quietly, "Hi." "He's shy tonight," my husband said. "It's the screen. The counselor at preschool says too many screens." "Since when does he have a counselor at preschool?" "Since you weren't here to ask," he said, pleasant as a door closing, and the call dropped, and the Wi-Fi took the blame again. A boy who checks his father's face before saying hi to his mother has been taught something. I heard it. I filed it under distance and screens and 8 more weeks. You can know a fact and refuse the finding. I did it for months at sea, with a straight face. I told myself things wives tell themselves across an ocean. He is tired. He is doing this alone. I chose this uniform and he never really chose it with me. The extension ended in January. The flights home were staggered, and the command element flew commercial on the last leg. I bought a stuffed triceratops in the Norfolk airport and rehearsed how I would kneel so I would be eye level when he ran. Wheels down at 4:06. I turned off airplane mode. No messages, no missed calls, nothing. You already know what was waiting at the gate. Now let me show it to you properly because the details matter. The details are what saved me. The man in the brown jacket was a process server. The envelope held 2 documents. The first was a petition for divorce. The second was an ex parte emergency custody order signed by a judge 2 days before my plane landed, granting my husband temporary sole custody of our son. Ex parte means the judge heard one side. Mine was on a plane over the Atlantic. Stapled behind the order were the exhibits. Exhibit A was an affidavit from my husband, sworn under oath, stating that I had cut off contact with our child. Exhibit B was a phone log, printed and highlighted, showing 4 calls from me in 9 months. Exhibit C was an email from my account in my voice, dated in October. I have decided to volunteer for the extension, the email said. Honestly, the space has been good for us. I never wrote it, but it wore my name. You should be ashamed, my mother-in-law said. Her voice did not shake. Believe me when I tell you her voice never shakes. 4 calls, 9 months. That baby cried for you in June and stopped crying for you by September. I heard it happen. My husband's lawyer stepped up beside her, a smooth man in a gray suit who introduced himself as Miles Fenton and told me not to contact the minor child before the hearing. The minor child. My son had become a defined term. The hearing is in 10 days, Fenton said, in the tone of a man giving directions to a tourist. You'll want counsel. In the meantime, any attempt to contact the child directly would look impulsive, given the record. He let the word record sit there between us, freshly painted. Whose record? I said. Mine, or the one you stapled together? 10 days, Captain. He was already turning away. He had used my rank the way some men do, as a set of quotation marks. The Marine Corps teaches you to inventory a disaster. Fuel, water, ammunition, casualties. You count what is real. So while my marriage ended in an airport, I counted what was real. The order was real. The exhibits were fake. My son was alive and safe and 40 minutes away, and I was not allowed to drive there. And then my father-in-law reached into his coat and held out a single envelope. It was small and worn soft at the corners. My handwriting was on the front, addressed to my son. Across my handwriting, in red, a postal stamp, return to sender. There's something you should see, he said. Gordon? My mother-in-law's voice came down like a window closing. Not here. Paper proves nothing. He held my eyes for one more second. Then he put the letter back in his coat, and the whole family turned, and they walked to short-term parking with their backs straight, and they left me at the carousel with a sea bag, a stuffed triceratops, and a court date. I did not cry at that airport. I want to be truthful with you about why. It was not strength. It was procedure. I stood at the carousel and photographed the order, the exhibits, the envelope in my memory, the arrivals board with its timestamp, 4:11 in the afternoon. Then I checked into a motel by the highway, sat on a floral bedspread, and wrote down everything anyone had said while it was fresh. The base legal assistance office saw me the next morning at 8. A captain with reading glasses spread the exhibits across her desk and went quiet for a long time. Then she tapped Exhibit B. This log says 4 calls in 9 months, she said. What does your phone say? We counted. My outgoing call log, on the phone in my hand, showed 214 outgoing call attempts to my husband's number and the tablet account. 214. One of us was lying, and it was not my phone. She could not represent me in a civilian custody case. She could do something better. She could tell me exactly what to ask for, and she wrote it on a legal pad in block letters. Carrier records, both accounts, subpoenaed, not screenshots. The ship's communications schedule, certified. The tablet itself, and a family law attorney who has beaten a liar before. That is how I found Ruth Abrams, 54 years old, 1 county over, with a cross-examination voice like a hand on your shoulder. She read the exhibits twice and set them down. An exhibit is not evidence, she said. It proves someone printed a page. We are going to find the printer. 10 days after the airport, we had the return hearing. I want to tell you the system saw through it right away. It did not. Judge Beatrice Holland's courtroom was on the second floor of the Onslow County Courthouse, and it was quiet the way an operating room is quiet. Fenton went first, and he was good. He did not raise his voice once. He handed up the phone log like it hurt him to do it. 4 calls, Your Honor. 9 months. We are not here to question the mother's service. We honor it. We are here because a 4-year-old cannot be raised by a photograph on the mantel. Objection to the speech, Ruth said without heat. Sustained. Exhibits, counsel, not eulogies. Then came the email, published on the courtroom screen in a font size that made it a billboard. I have decided to volunteer for the extension. Honestly, the space has been good for us. Her own words, Fenton said. Her own choice. Ruth stood. Your Honor, we dispute the authenticity of both exhibits. We have subpoenas out to the carrier and to the Navy. We ask the court to hold this record open until real records exist. And in the meantime, counsel, Judge Holland asked her, where does the child sleep? That is the question the whole machine turns on. Not who is lying. Where does the child sleep tonight? The judge was careful, and she was visibly unhappy, and she ruled the only way the paper in front of her allowed. Temporary custody stayed with my husband pending a full investigation. She appointed a guardian ad litem for my son, an investigator named Hector Morales, and she granted me supervised visitation. 2 hours, twice a week, in a family center that smelled like crayons and hand sanitizer. Captain Sinclair, she said before the gavel, the court makes no findings today about you. The court notes that you came home to this with your sea bag still packed and that you have conducted yourself with restraint. Get me records. It was not a victory. It was a judge leaving a door unlocked. Ruth squeezed my forearm once, hard, which I learned was her entire vocabulary of comfort. The first visit, my son stood behind the visit supervisor's leg for 6 minutes. I know it was 6 minutes because there was a clock and I have habits. He was taller. His hair was cut differently, short like his father's. When he finally came to the little table, he did not run. He walked, and he watched me the way you watch a stranger, who might be a magician, and he said, Are you back from the ship for real? For real, I said. Daddy said the ship was better. Children repeat things without malice. That is what makes them accurate. We built a dinosaur puzzle. At the end of the 2 hours, he hugged me around the neck all at once, like something breaking loose, and the supervisor had to help unwind his arms, and I walked to my car at an even pace and sat behind the wheel. For the first time since the arrivals gate, I let myself cry. 4 minutes. Then I wiped my face and drove to Ruth's office because grief was not going to raise my son. Evidence was. Here is where I have to confess the thing I got wrong, because this story does not work if I lie to you about myself. I decided my mother-in-law had built all of it. It made sense. Carol had never wanted a daughter-in-law who deployed. She was the one who announced it at the terminal. She was the voice on every holiday phone call and the fist behind every family decision for 30 years. My husband could stare at a floor, but he could not plan a war. His mother could. On a yellow legal pad, next to the real evidence, I wrote her name and I underlined it twice. Remember that legal pad? I had to eat it later, 1 page at a time. The first crack came from her husband. Gordon called me from the parking lot of a hardware store, talking low, like a man reporting from behind enemy lines. That letter at the airport, he said. It wasn't the only one. We met at a diner off Highway 17. He came in carrying a shoebox like it was a folded flag. Inside were 31 letters and 2 birthday packages. Every envelope in my handwriting, everyone addressed to my son, everyone stamped "Return to sender" in red. Found them in the crawl space over Neil's workbench in October, he said. I mailed one back to myself to be sure. It came to my house fine. Somebody at yours was refusing your mail. He looked at his hands. I should have said something in October. I told myself there was an explanation. There's always an explanation. Sometimes it's just a bad one. Why keep them? I asked. Because a man who throws away letters, Gordon said, is worse than a man who returns them. I raised one of those 2 men. I was finding out which. I asked him the question that was already ruining my sleep. Did Carol know? He was quiet for a while. Carol believes what she's shown, he said finally. That's not the same as knowing. It's not innocent either. I heard it as a confirmation. It was a warning, and I missed it. Now the chain, link by link, the way it actually tightened. Link 1. The carrier records came back under subpoena in February, not screenshots. Certified records, both accounts, on paper with a custodian's signature. My number showed 214 outgoing call attempts across the deployment. His account showed the block. My number was added to a blocked list 23 days after the ship sailed. 23 days. The The calls did not die of bad Wi-Fi. They were executed. Ruth laid the 2 logs side by side on her conference table. 214 attempts, 4 connected, she said. That is not a mother who stopped calling. That is a phone that stopped being answered. Different crime, different criminal. Link 2. The guardian ad litem did his home visits. Hector Morales was 47, unhurried, with the gift of noticing while appearing to sip coffee. In his notes from the visit to my husband's house, 2 lines mattered. The minor child has a tablet device for video calls with mother. The video call application is no longer installed on the device. When he asked my husband about it, my husband said the app kept crashing, and there was a woman in the kitchen who was introduced as a family friend, and her name was Whitney Lang. I did not know that name yet. The bank did. Morales came to see me too. By then I had let the motel go and rented a 2-bedroom half a mile from the elementary school my son was zoned for. I had furnished the 2nd bedroom before I furnished my own. He walked through it slowly. The bed with the dinosaur sheets, the bookshelf, the shoebox. May I? He asked, and lifted the lid and read 3 envelopes worth of red stamps without changing his face. 31 letters, I said. There were 33. His grandfather kept 2 back. He says a man should have proof in more than one house. Morales set the lid down. In this work, Captain, everyone tells me what kind of parent they are, he said. I stopped listening years ago. I look at what people built when nobody was coming to inspect it. He looked around the small room once more. Somebody built this room for a boy who is not currently allowed to sleep in it. I note things like that. He wrote something small in his pad and declined coffee and left. I sat in the little room for a while after that, on the bed with the dinosaur sheets. It was the first hour since the airport that felt like being believed. Link 3. The financial subpoena came back in March. Our joint deployment savings, the account we fed for 4 years for a down payment, had been drained in 4 transfers. $19,400. The money landed in a new account with 2 names on it. The same 2 names appeared on a lease application for a rental house 2 states north, submitted in December while I was still at sea. Neil Sinclair, Whitney Lang. I read the 2nd name 3 times. Not because I could not process the affair, because I was watching my theory die. A jealous mother-in-law does not co-sign a lease. Somebody younger was planning a life, and my son was on the packing list. Ruth watched me arrive at it. She has a way of letting you get there on your own, so it belongs to you. You've had Carol tried and convicted since January, she said. She announced it in an airport, Ruth. She performed it in an airport. Ask yourself who wrote the material. Ruth tapped the lease application. 61-year-old women do not move to another state with their sons' girlfriends. Follow the money, Captain. The money never performs. The money just goes where it was always going. The transfers had started in November. The first one was dated 2 days after the password on my email account was reset from a laptop I had never owned. $19,400 walking out of our future in 4 quiet installments while I stood watch on the far side of the world. There is a special coldness to reading a bank statement as a casualty report. Every line item is a day I thought we were fine, and the tablet was worse. The Gal report hearing came in the 2nd week of March. If you have never sat in a family courtroom, understand that nobody shouts. It is quiet, like an operating room is quiet. Ruth called a digital forensic examiner named Simone Aldrich, 38, flat-voiced, the kind of witness who reads numbers like scripture and lets them do the violence. The court had ordered the tablet produced. Fenton had fought the production for 2 weeks, on grounds that grew smaller each time, and that fight told Ruth everything. Nobody spends 2 weeks protecting a toy, she said, unless it stopped being a toy. Simone had imaged it. The video call application was removed from the device on January 6th, she testified. Removal requires the parent passcode. The account behind the application retains server-side logs. I recovered them in full. She turned a page. Between March of last year and January of this year, the account logged 214 inbound call attempts from the mother's credentials. It also holds 41 audio and video recordings uploaded by the mother. Bedtime stories, by their titles. She looked up for the first time. The playback log shows none of them were ever played for the child. 214 attempts on the carrier records, 214 on the server, The same number arrived at from two directions that had never met. In a quiet courtroom, arithmetic can sound like a door being kicked in. Fenton rose to cross because he had to. Ms. Aldrich, applications are deleted every day by children by accident. Removal requires the parent passcode, Simone said. It was entered correctly on the first attempt. Perhaps the child watched a parent enter it. Perhaps. The removal occurred at 11:40 at night. The same device shows no activity by the child after 8:15 on any evening in the record. You cannot testify to who was holding the tablet. No, she agreed pleasantly. Only that whoever held it knew the passcode, was awake at 11:40, and 3 minutes earlier had used the same network to search the phrase, "Can a deployment be used against custody?" That search is also in the image. Fenton looked at his notes for a moment. There was nothing in his notes that could help him. The judge asked whether he wished to respond to the discrepancy with his Exhibit B. Fenton asked for a recess, and then a chair scraped in the gallery, and my mother-in-law stood up. You have to picture Carol, 61 years old, church posture, never one hair out of formation. She stood in the middle of that silence, and she looked at her son, and her voice, which never shakes, shook. You told me she never called, Carol said. You showed me a log. Ma'am, the bailiff started, moving toward her. You sat in my kitchen. She was not loud. She was worse than loud. You showed me a log and an email, and you let me stand in an airport and call that woman a deserter in front of strangers. Judge Holland tapped her gavel once, almost gently, and ordered the gallery to order. Carol sat down, but the room had already turned over. You could feel the furniture of the thing rearrange itself. My husband was staring at the floor again, and this time his mother was staring at him the same way his father had at the airport, and I finally recognized what that look was. It was an audit. Judge Holland dissolved the emergency order that afternoon. She found the exhibits unreliable on their face, pending the final hearing, restored my son to my physical custody, and continued the guardian ad litem's appointment. My son fell asleep in his booster seat 11 minutes into the drive home, with his hand around a stuffed triceratops that had waited 2 months in a motel closet. I did not turn on the radio. Some silence you earn, and you do not spend it. He woke up when I carried him in, the way they always do at the exact threshold. He looked at the hallway and the bookshelf and the bed with the dinosaur sheets he had never seen. And he asked the question 4-year-olds ask, the one that goes through you like a round. Is this where we live when you're real? This is where we live, I said, and I am always real. He considered the terms. Okay, he said. Entreaty number 2 was signed, instantly and completely, and he slept 12 hours, and I sat in the doorway for most of them on the floor in the posture they teach you for watching a perimeter. In the hallway after the ruling, Carol was sitting alone on a bench with a manila folder on her knees. She did not apologize. She was not able to yet, and to be fair, I was not able to hear it yet. She just held the folder out. Inside were the things my husband had fed her for months. Printed screenshots of the fake log passed across her kitchen table, a copy of the forged email in a plastic sleeve like a relic. Photographs of me from social media, at a port call, smiling in Suda Bay, with the caption she had been given, "She posts this and can't call her son." Underneath all of it, in her handwriting, a list of dates titled Audrey's Calls, with 4 entries, copied faithfully off a lie. She had been building a case too. Somebody had handed her the bricks one at a time. I went home and tore the top page off the yellow legal pad, the one with her name underlined twice, and I put it in the shredder, and I stood there while the machine ate it. I had spent 4 months prosecuting the wrong defendant in the privacy of my skull. The discipline that saved me in that courtroom had failed me in my own kitchen. If this story makes me sound wise, understand that I was wise on paper and wrong in my heart, and only one of those got corrected in time. 2 weeks before the final hearing, my doorbell rang at 9 at night, and my husband was standing on my porch alone. He looked bad. I registered it the way you register weather. He had the collar of a nice coat turned up and the face of a man whose accounts were frozen in every sense. 5 minutes, he said. No lawyers. I stepped out and pulled the door shut behind me because my son was asleep down the hall in the room with the dinosaur sheets, where he belonged. Here's the thing, Neil said. This has gotten away from everybody. Nobody wanted this. If we settle now, tonight, 50-50, I'll withdraw everything. The affidavit, all of it. And the other matter, the referral, your lawyer drops that. It goes away. Everybody's Christmas card looks normal in 5 years. Think about Toby. I think about Toby at a professional level, I said. You want me prosecuted? Mother of the Year? You wrote the exhibits, Neil. I just kept my phone. He looked at me for a long moment and then at the small light in my hand. You're recording this, he said. Somebody in this family should keep accurate records. He left without using his 5 minutes, and the recording went to Ruth in the morning, and I will tell you what was on it that mattered. Not a confession. Something better. A man offering to withdraw sworn statements the moment they stopped being useful. Sworn is supposed to mean something. In my line of work, it still does. The final hearing came in April, and my husband's case had one leg left to stand on, the email. Even after the tablet, that email did damage because it was in my voice. I have decided to volunteer for the extension. Honestly, the space has been good for us. If I wrote that, then whatever else was true, I had chosen the ship. Fenton built his whole closing around it, the mother's own words. Ruth answered with 2 documents. The first was a certified letter from my battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Owen Sawyer, read into the record standing because Ruth understood theater exactly as well as she pretended not to. It stated 3 things. In the unsentimental grammar, the Marine Corps saves for the truth. The 90-day extension was directed at the unit level and was involuntary for all hands. No member of the command volunteered for it because volunteering for it was not possible. Captain Sinclair submitted 9 documented requests through the Family Readiness Officer for assistance reaching her family, beginning in the 4th month of the deployment. The log of those requests was enclosed and certified, and Captain Sinclair's performance of duty throughout the extension was in keeping with the highest traditions of the service. Does the Navy often certify Wi-Fi problems? Judge Holland asked dryly. When asked in writing, Your Honor, Ruth said, the Navy certifies nearly anything? That is rather the point of the Navy. 9 requests. I filed the first one back when I still believed the problem was Wi-Fi. There is a version of me preserved in that log, week by week, getting less naive in official correspondence, and I am glad she exists on paper. She is the answer to the word abandoned. The second document was the email's own header, laid over the ship's certified communications schedule. The email left my account at 2:17 in the morning, ship's time, on October 9th. From 200 hours to 600 hours on October 9th, the ship was in a scheduled, written, total communications blackout for a straight transit. Nothing left that ship, not a message, not a ping, nothing for 4 hours, by order, in writing. The court has been asked to believe, Judge Holland said, that this email crossed an ocean during a blackout the Navy scheduled in writing. The court declines. After that, the file did the rest. The password, reset on my email account, performed in November from a laptop at an IP address that resolved to a rental house 2 states north. The lease application, the 4 transfers, $19,400, and a text message, recovered in Discovery, sent from my husband to Whitney Lang on the 3rd of January, 3 days before somebody deleted a Yellow Tablets only phone app. Judge Holland read it into the record herself, the way judges do when they want a sentence to have a witness. Once the judge signs, we tell him Mommy chose the ship. My husband did not stare at the floor while she read it. That is the one thing I will give him. He looked at me and I watched him understand that I was not the one who had destroyed him. He had typed his own verdict a month before I landed. Benton's closing lasted 90 seconds. There are lawyers who can argue with arithmetic, and he was not one of them, and to his credit, he did not try. He asked the court to remember that his client was a father who loved his son. That part, I believe, was even true. It has never once been the question. Plenty of people love the things they steal. Carol and Gordon sat on my side of the aisle that day. Nobody planned it. Nobody remarked on it. But I watched Judge Holland notice it, the way she noticed everything. The defendant's own parents seated behind the woman he had sworn was unfit. And I thought, not for the first time, that the most damaging testimony in any family is where people choose to sit. The order came down that week. Sole legal and physical custody to me. Supervised visitation for him, with a step-up plan if he completed what the court required. The $19,400 to be restored in full. The fabricated exhibits, the forged email, and the false affidavit referred to the district attorney's office. Whitney Lang did not appear at any hearing. When the account froze, the lease application quietly died, and so, I am told, did the plan attached to it. On the courthouse steps, a reporter from the county paper asked if I felt like I had won. This was never about beating him, I said. It was about a bedtime. That was the whole quote. It was the whole truth. Now for the part the courtroom could not order anybody to do. In June, I drove to my in-laws' house because some conversations you owe in person. Carol and I sat on the porch where 7 years of holidays had been staged, 2 glasses of tea going warm between us, neither of us performing for anyone for the first time in our acquaintance. "I believed him," she said, "because believing him was easier than asking. There is no soft way to say what I called you in that airport." "I need to say mine," I said. "I spent 4 months certain it was you. I built the whole case in my head. I had you convicted, Carol. I owe you the same apology I wanted." She looked at me for a moment. "We were both given very good evidence," she said, dry as a court record, and God help us both, we laughed. It was not a warm laugh yet. It was the first draft of one. "We set the boundaries out loud, like adults. Sunday dinners, yes. Second-guessing my parenting, no. Her son discussed in front of my son, no." Gordon came out to the porch near the end, drying his hands on a dish towel, and stood there until we both looked at him. "Two women I respect on one porch, telling each other the truth," he said. "Took this family 30 years to produce the sight." He put the shoebox on the table between us. He had tied it shut with kitchen string, like evidence, which is what it was, or like a present, which is what it became. "The 2 letters I kept back are staying in my desk," he said. "A man should have proof in more than one house. The rest go home with the boy." At dinner that Sunday, he sat next to my son and taught him to salt a tomato, and I watched the quietest member of the family, the one who had said maybe 40 words in 7 years of holidays, and I understood that I had spent those years counting the wrong things about almost everyone at that table. The shoebox went home with me that day, and the 31 letters sit on a shelf in a small bedroom now, and we read one every night. The boy likes hearing where the ship was when I wrote each one. The letters arrived a year late, and it turns out they still work. That is the thing about the written truth. It keeps. Neil never apologized. I used to rehearse the apology I would require, the words, the order of them. I have let that go. Peace that depends on another person's sentence is just a different kind of custody dispute. He sees his son at the family center on Tuesdays, and I am told he shows up on time, and I hope that grows into something for my son's sake. The boy deserves the best version of every person who loves him, including the one who failed him worst. This past week, the promotion selection message came out and my name was on the list. Major. My son asked what a major does. I told him a major is someone the Marine Corps trusts to keep track of what matters. He thought about that and asked if I would still be home for dinner. Both, buddy. That is the entire ambition now. Both. We rent a house with a hallway wall where he is allowed to draw. There's a triceratops on it 4 feet tall, and nobody is ever painting over it. If my story has taught you anything, let it be this. The truth does not need you to scream. It needs you to stay calm, keep your receipts, and refuse to become the person who wronged you, even in the privacy of your own head. That last part is the hardest. I know because for 4 months I convicted an innocent woman at my own kitchen table, and the only court that heard the case was me. If this story moved you, share it with someone who is holding on through a long distance or a long silence. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been certain about someone and wrong? I read every comment, and your stories keep me honest. If you want more stories about courage, justice, and hope, subscribe and turn on notifications because there is always another homecoming worth telling. Thank you for spending this time with me and with my son and with the shoebox full of letters that finally got delivered. The end.